So if anybody who's been watching me at all, they should already know who you are. You've been in this vegan space, this fruit eating space for so long that um, I don't know, you've been really doing it for over, has it been 10 years or so?
Yeah, it's going on 14, March 2026.
Oh my gosh. Well done. Way to stay consistent with it. Not only with
Yeah.
your videos, but also with the diet. So, I guess what's unique about you is you've been doing it for so long. You've been low fat, you've been spreading the same message, and you're doing it as a mother, which is very unique in our space, I think. So
Yeah.
I love that for you. All right. So
Yeah, if anything, like the amount of time I've been doing this for just is a testament to how sustainable it really is.
that's true. Well, I guess that kind of goes off in the first question I had for you. This is a very niche way of eating. What got you into it? Was it your nutrition or I guess your education background, or was it something else?
Yeah, so it was totally Freely the Banana Girl.
Okay, that's good. I
I
feel
was,
big.
I remember specifically, I was kind of in this like land of raw vegan eating, and I was really into fasting, and I was pretty underweight at the time. And I was just like thinking that this really isn't working out too well. And mostly because I was thinking long term with my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, of having kids. And my menstrual cycle really wasn't normal. And I was thinking, that my diet had something to do with that. And that kind of led me to getting on YouTube and kind of, I think I was typing in like fruitarians, right? And seeing if anybody had been doing it long term. And then I came across Freely the Banana Girl. And it was specifically this video where Harley was recording her, and she wasn't like fully, with all of her results that she has now, or even had, after 5 years of doing it. But she was showing like her flat belly and how slim she was, and talking about that she ate like 3,000 calories that day of just fruit. And I was like, I want that. Like, I want to look like her. I want to be able to eat that much. And she was doing a lot of running at the time as well. So I was into sport, and I had all the pieces together except for I was heavily in the mindset of restriction in order to look, slim, lean, or whatever. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a go, and I completely abandoned what I had previously been doing, unknowingly entering this like metabolic damage healing phase. And that's stuff that I learned later on, but none of it was what I learned in school. And my education, I found ways for it to support um, understanding how this lifestyle works, but that didn't come until after, much after, and after I had achieved success with the diet and the lifestyle.
That's awesome. So does that mean you were looking up vegan stuff or fruitarian stuff before you even learned about Freely, or did she just pop up
Oh
on your
yeah.
phone? Okay.
Yeah, actually I had came into I think it was first um, who's that guy? The Sun Food Diet Success System, David Wolf. I think
Okay.
his book was the first like raw vegan book that I had gotten. And I had done what he had proposed in his book and was into like superfoods and cacao nibs and like hemp seeds. But the emphasis was never on eating sufficient fruit. Like even in his book, it was very much don't eat too much sweet fruit, like it's hybrid, and it's going to give you problems with your blood sugar and things like that and your weight. And I was like, okay, don't eat too much fruit. But then I was just flailing in this space of always just under eating, right? And I had come into like the raw vegan space from a low fat, low carb, high protein, calorie restrictive diet. So I think I had went to yoga school. I am certified to teach yoga, and I got more interested in raw veganism there. Um, so then after that, I found the mucusless diet healing system book, and I know you're familiar with that as well. Um, and that sent me kind of on this whirlwind of, okay, fruit's good, but not too much, and focus on this fasting. And I completely like abandoned the whole concept of like a transition diet, which is probably, not very beneficial in the grand scheme of things, at least back then, in terms of, how well I was doing with the diet that I was following. But ultimately, like, I was hungry and
Yeah,
my body needed more nourishment. And so I was looking for a way to eat a really healthy diet, but be able to eat more and still look and perform the way that I wanted to, and also have the health to match.
that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, obviously. And is the mucusless healing system something you would still recommend today? Like, do you feel that there's merit to this, I guess, the science inside of it, or um,
Oh,
is
that
it
is
just
such
a
a good
little?
question.
I don't. Sometimes I feel like it's just too much to think about when you can just keep it simple. But I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that one, there is no science now that backs up his philosophy and theory in that book.
Got it.
So his concept is that we are like a vacuum system, which I agree with that concept. The way that our lungs pump our blood, and um, that pump system plays into the rest of our filters in our body that help us to get rid of, metabolic waste and things that aren't supposed to be hanging about. But I think that there's an overemphasis on under eating.
Yeah.
And I think that I've tried that diet enough times that I understand where the benefits are at, which is eating like a fruit based diet, but maybe not fruit exclusively in terms of sustainability. And also that as human beings, we require a certain amount of carbohydrates in order to produce sufficient energy every day. And I don't subscribe to the concept of under eating in any kind of a way anymore.
Yeah.
I think that it can be extremely detrimental. I think that I've had health issues that I've had to overcome because of going down that road. And, there's people out there who claim to be breatharians and fruitarians and only eat one meal a day, and you never see them thriving long term. So I think that, reading the book, it was very enlightening initially. And I've read that book probably like 5 or 6 times. So I know it by heart. But I will say that I think that the full picture wasn't grasped. And that's what I'm trying to figure out now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I've been doing a lot of deep diving into the whole, there's plenty of people that do fruit eating and then they have their own ideas on how to approach that. And some of them I've noticed they seem to believe that the cleaner, and this is a weird concept to me too, because your body's always being cleaned, I think, but the cleaner
Right.
you are, the less you need over time. So it's almost like they are trying to approach breatharianism without actually being that. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen any of that before.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been in this space for, almost 2 decades, I'd say, because prior to like really going full throttle with a high carb, low fat, plant-based, vegan, fruit-based diet, I was in the raw vegan, fruit eating, breatharian fasting space. And I'll say that a lot of people come and go, and I keep seeing the same kind of concepts like come up and then go and come and go with different people trying them. I think that it's aged a lot of people, like, going after this breatharian thing and even the fruitarian thing, because if you're not doing a fruit-based diet right, or fruitarian diet right, it's going to age you faster. And that's because you are not taking in enough energy. And so it really comes down to that like basic concept of being able to get in enough energy so that your cells can work properly. And that's something that I connected the dots with in terms of what my education was really trying to tell me, even though none of my professors came out and said like this is the most important, concept to really grasp when it comes to metabolic health, because we do have backup pathways like gluconeogenesis and even ketosis that can provide energy for our cells in like times of famine or just intentional restriction, but it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost to our hormones primarily. And, I've listened to a lot of During Rider Harley Johnstone's content, and he would always say that hormones really, paint the picture. They dictate so much. And I really have come to understand that more and believe in that, because through my own personal experience, you can be subscribed to some kind of dogmatic way of eating or living, but your body's not always going to agree with it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that um, figuring out how to eat enough is the struggle, right? Because you have to eat enough in order to have proper insulin sensitivity and cortisol regulation, but also it comes down to your body like just being in balance in general. And really, that's the name of the game. Is it's not so much about like how can I like eat as little as possible, but rather how can I keep my body in balance so that I can stay energized, I can stay youthful, I can stay lean, because that's really what it comes down to. And then just to bring the mucusless diet back into this really briefly, um, I think that they disregard any kind of new science that's come out since then, because I know there's this community who really subscribes to the mucusless diet and throws out the concepts of like B12 like as being trash and other things like that. And really the idea with that book is that you can eventually live on so little food and just live on air. But like if you look at VO2 max, right, and if you do any kind of research into what that is it's basically your body's ability to uptake oxygen when you're doing aerobic exercise. And the higher your VO2 max, the higher your metabolic rate. So that's going to be the more energy that you can create from the oxygen that's coming into your system. And I think that if you're going to just like completely throw out, okay, we don't need to eat, but we can take in oxygen, like you're just going to be, you know, catabolizing your system. And I've seen people that have died from anorexia. And so it's a very real concept. And I think that I don't know if you remember that guy Mango,
Yeah.
the fruitarian guy who passed away. Apparently, he had clogged arteries, and I think that people need to understand if they are in this like fruitarian, fasting space, that you can give yourself heart disease by participating in calorie restriction long term. It does raise cholesterol and causes you to be insulin resistant. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. And that's what I'm here to help people kind of learn more about. And that way they can kind of eat in a way and learn to navigate their diet and lifestyle in a way that's going to be beneficial and not detrimental.
How do you like, what do you think it would take to have somebody do fruit only, or maybe not even just fruit only, but say maybe a Doug Graham style? He does fruits and some vegetables. What does it take for a person to actually do that successfully? Because we obviously don't live in a world where we have abundant good fruit. Obviously, you've tested it out a few times. I know we've seen you do that, and you've always come back to rice at night, which is it's a good thing for you. But
Right.
obviously, a lot of people fail at fruit only. So, what does it take to succeed with it?
I think that I've been successful with it with a fruit-based diet. I don't eat exclusively fruit-based for those of you who aren't familiar with the way that I eat. I eat primarily fruit till four, or raw till four is really the diet that I um, went to after being fruit-based, because I started my healing journey, my metabolic healing journey, where I went from that space of being into fasting and restriction and, fruit only eating, raw vegan, into eating abundantly, but it's still raw vegan and it's fruit based, right? I did that for 2 years, gained 60 pounds. But it's important, context is important, because I didn't, get fat necessarily. I just went from underweight to like borderline overweight. My BMI was like 24, 25, I'd say, when at the peak of my recovery. And there's so many people who will say, well, if you just eat fruit, you'll like magically drop all this weight, right? And I like proved that that's not the case at all. There's so much more at play. And so that's when I really started realizing, because I was doing it for weight loss. I was very driven, like I just want to be as small as possible.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of females can relate. I mean, most of my clients that I work with are coming to me because they want to lose weight. I think that's a main driver for people to even start questioning, the way that they're eating. But I realized then that like raw food isn't some like magic potion. I think that raw food eating, fruit eating is extremely healthy, but it doesn't have to be all that you eat. So then when I adopted like a raw till 4 diet, and started adding starch in, a big thing that changed for me was digestion wise. I have a background, health history of having IBS or irritable bowel syndrome and gastroparesis. And the fruit worked really well for managing the gastroparesis. It's not something that'll just go away for me. I have like a malformed pyloric valve that they found by doing like an endoscopic test. And yeah, so that's not going to go away. So that is what, has allowed me to be really successful with a fruit-based diet, is because that's really the only way that I've found to eat that's worked to manage that. And then, fruit comes with all these nutrients. It digests itself for the most part because it breaks itself down. It's got easily available sugars, and other nutrients. And so I think I was able to fix a lot of things in myself health wise by eating a fruit based diet. But I found that it came with kind of some negatives as well, because fruit contains a lot of fructose depending on which fruit it is. And then there can be other kind of irritants in fruit, like citrus acid. If you have too much of it, you can have kind of like, I don't want to say allergy symptoms, but just intolerance symptoms. So I found that by having starch at night, it really neutralized any kind of reaction that I was going to have to fruit eating. So then it allowed me to be able to eat in a way where I could be fruit based, but just not exclusively. And every time I go like exclusively fruit only eating, I always find I end up having some symptoms flare up, whether it's digestive wise or just irritation symptoms, kind of like, I don't want to say like full on allergy symptoms, but like it'll just be like intolerance type symptoms, or maybe I'll get like a rash. Like I'm allergic to mangoes, and I found that out the hard way by eating a
Yeah.
bunch of mangoes, and I just got a rash all over myself. So I think that my experimentation with all of this has allowed me to be really helpful for my clients and the other people that I interact with in this space, who end up not, feeling as well as they think that they could. So I think what Doug Ram provided with the 80-10-10 was, or is still, a very sustainable way of approaching a fruit-based diet, because a lot of raw vegans get into too many fats.
Mhm.
And he's proposing, well, you need to make sure that your fat content is on the lower end in order for you to be successful with this. So 80-10-10 is really where I think people started having more success with a raw vegan diet and a fruit-based diet, where now we're no longer fearing fruit. So that was really big for me, because like, where are you going to get your calories on a raw vegan diet if it's not from fruit? It's going to be coming from fats. And fats can be problematic when they are eaten in excess, for a few reasons, but primarily their AGE content, which is the advanced glycation end product content, is really high in plant fats just naturally. So that can contribute towards inflammation and also like blood sugar dysregulation, so insulin resistance. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. Actually, my next video, I'm going to be talking more about that topic. But this emphasis on carbohydrates being the front loader of the diet, I think, is really important. And then, just getting into, again, how well fruit digests and is assimilated in the body. I mean, I agree with Freely when she says that we are frugivores and we should be eating more similar to primates, primarily. But I think that there's always going to be individual variability involved. So everybody has to figure out the fruit-based diet that's going to work best for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good approach because, like you said, everybody is a little different, whether it be in culture. Like I like to throw culture in there too, but I like your approach. You always start with the fruit and then end with the starch, and it seems more sustainable that way, honestly.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
do think culture has played a major role too. I think some people who have um, genetics that come from equatorial regions and they've lived there their whole lives are going to do better on a fruit-based diet. But then, the Asian cultures have really thrived on a rice-based diet. So I think anytime you have a culture in a geographical location living on a starch-based diet primarily, they're going to be getting a lot of benefits from that because it's a high carbohydrate diet. And by default, I think when you eat high carb, you naturally are going to eat lower in fat and get sufficient protein. But I think adding the fruit piece in there really can just take things up a notch because of the amount of nutrition that's available that our body doesn't have to work so hard for to get.
right. And it's interesting because you mentioned all the negative sides to the fat, but one of the things that brought me into it from the beginning was Esselstyn and what he had to say about fats and how it's damaging to your endothelial cells. And it's funny because that side, while they might say fruit is good because it's a good whole food, they never seem to promote it in the same way, like the McDougalls, the Esselstyns, or like the Chef AJ's. It was always like a limit of 1 to 2 pieces a day. And I never understood that because their whole emphasis was calorie density. And when you're considering all the foods, you've got your low vegetables and then they like their starches, but fruit was between them. And I'm like, why are we not focused on this at all? It's a little bit higher than the vegetables. So I never understood that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that that's where that their protocol is what I'll call it, because I don't want to say that style diet because it's still high carb, low fat, but
Yeah.
that specific protocol, I think that's where it fails. Like so many of the people that I work with are coming to me from like a starch solution approach, and they want to eat more fruit based because they want to be able to eat more fruit. Like
Yeah.
everybody who comes to me from that space is like, okay, well, you figured out a way to eat this way where you can eat more fruit. Like, I want to do it too because they've really like fear mongered like fruit eating and saying, because I've read the books, they've said that fruit causes high triglycerides. Fruit can dysregulate your blood sugar. Fruit contains too much fructose, and that can lead to fatty liver disease. And out of all the research that I've seen, nothing of the peer-reviewed clinical research supports fruit eating in a negative way.
Yeah.
So, a lot of it'll be linked to like high fructose corn syrup. But then, even there, while I don't necessarily promote like eating high fructose corn syrup, it's never included in a way where it's with a low fat diet.
Yeah. That's true.
So, most of the research is done on fruit eating or sugar eating, not controlling for dietary
Well,
fat
it's a
intake.
low fat diet, 30%. So,
Right, right, which is, that's like the max amount of fat that I would recommend somebody to consume in their diet. And really, I would recommend that for a child, not
yeah.
for an adult, because it is still the number one cause of death in worldwide is heart disease, and that is primarily fueled by fat intake. Now, what I will say though is that the triglyceride thing and blood sugar dysregulation, you're going to see that in fruit eating people who don't eat enough. Okay. Because there's two primary factors that are involved with insulin sensitivity. And the first one is eating sufficient carbohydrate. And that's where people get themselves in trouble, even eating a starch based diet. And I've made videos about, Chef AJ proposing that she doesn't eat enough and that I don't want to say that it's caused anything, but I don't think it's helped her situation dealing with some of the health issues that she's had. And then same with McDougal, before his death, he was trying to eat more fats and more nuts and things like that. And I'm like, why wouldn't you just start with the fruit? Why wouldn't you eat more fruit first? Because for myself, eating sufficient fruit when my body needed to gain weight, it did.
Hmm.
So eating sufficient carbohydrate is going to correct a lot of things that are maybe not working so well metabolically speaking, because now your body's getting the sugars and the carbohydrates that it needs in order to produce the energy that it needs to function properly. Um, but I always agree with what they have to say about the fats. I've seen those diagrams where if you consume a fatty meal, it takes 12 hours for your circulation to clear out that fat.
Hmm.
And that is what's going to be responsible for the endothelial damage. Also raising, you know, depending on the fat source, can contribute towards elevated cholesterol levels and triglycerides and weight gain. I still use McDougall's phrase, the fat you eat is the fat you wear.
Yeah.
But I think that when it comes to fats too, that, depending on what your goals are, you can have some in your diet. Like your diet doesn't need to be exclusively overt fat free unless that's how you prefer to eat. That's how I personally prefer to eat. But if there's going to be like some sesame seeds on something, I'm not going to not eat it because of that. But I prefer to keep my diet very low in fat. But like my children, for instance, and my recommendations for children is to allow them to eat as much fats as they desire within the context of a predominant high carb diet.
Yeah.
So then their desire for the fat is going to be more dictated based on their needs for fats rather than their needs for energy, because the carbohydrate is there.
Yeah. Actually, that's the way I approach it too.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, this is the way I approach like meal times as well. We have the assortment of food that I know I'm gonna eat, and then we might have something they can add to it, whether that be like avocado on their I don't know, their burrito bowl, or the sesame seeds, the sesame oil. I'll throw in oil too.
Yeah.
I know I grew up with that stuff, and obviously there are cultures out there. They do the extra virgin olive oil, and it seems like it's they're doing all right on it, but
Yeah.
I don't know at what point we switch things, like obviously they're growing and they need the extra calories. We don't want to grow. I don't want to grow. Because that means I'm just gaining more adipose tissue all over my body. So at what point do you think that we need to maybe pay attention to the fat when we're growing up or when we have kids?
I think always striving to have a BMI that's in the normal range is a good place to start, whether that's for a child or for an adult. And whenever the BMI is a little high on the higher end, then we're going to want to, scale the fats back. We don't need to scale the calories back because that's where people go to first, but scale the fats back and then everything should kind of correct itself. And if the metabolism is still a little sluggish and you're still working through some insulin resistance, which this is going to be variable based on everyone's genetics being different, but then you just throw in some exercise and it should kind of take care of itself. But even through pregnancy, weight gain is going to be natural. I think for myself, I just had single pregnancies, like one baby. I know you had a twin
Mhm.
pregnancy, so guidelines are a little different for that in terms of weight gain. But I always gained between like 20 and 35 pounds for each of my kids, depending on my starting point of my, weight. With my last one, I think I ended up gaining the most weight, but I also started at my lowest weight that I've been eating this way too.
That
So
makes sense.
ultimately, and I'm really trying to emphasize this right now in my like VIP membership with my a YouTube channel lives that I do on a weekly basis, that you have to have the foundation of your diet down first. The high carb, low fat, plant based, ideally vegan foundation down before you really want to start manipulating any other factors of your diet. You want to have a way of eating that you prefer, that's high carb, low fat, that you can sustain. Because I don't think that I would have been as successful as I've been eating this way if I didn't find a way that's worked really well for my body and that is like easy to do. I'm never even like questioning like, can I stick with this today? It's just this is the way I eat now, and it's really easy for me to do it day in and day out.
Is it difficult for you to, and this is making a big assumption. I assume your kids and you eat differently. Obviously, I think you probably have them on a very high fruit diet. But when it comes to other meal times, is it hard to prepare maybe perhaps separate meals, or is it something you're used
Um,
to?
no, I mean, the thing, my kids actually eat more like starch solution style.
Okay.
Um, Sometimes they'll have like a fruit breakfast, but I don't think, the thing about fruit is that it goes through you so quick and that energy is available for you to just, use right now, that I don't think it's as like sustaining for them.
Mhm.
So they eat a starch, for breakfast every morning, whether it's like cereal or oatmeal or pancakes or hash browns is usually something that we're having. And then there's a fruit component that goes with it, whether it's like a smoothie or fresh fruit. And so the way I structure their meals is different from the way that I do mine. Based on their preferences too, for the way that they eat more like, we build a plate. Here's your fruit portion, here's your vegetable, here's your, plant-based protein, and here's your starch. And that's generally how we structure lunch and dinner. But then breakfast is more like really high carb, low fat with the fruit and the starch there.
Okay.
Whereas for myself, I'm just eating fruit all day, and I find that it works so well with being a parent because it's a grab and go food. It's
It
a
really is.
fast food. If I'm making a smoothie, I'm sharing it with them, but I'm having the majority of that smoothie. Um, when I'm feeding my son, I'm eating the fruit that we're having at that meal, but he's eating these other things that I've had already either prepared or I'm preparing now. So I think that as a parent, like it makes it really easy for me. And then it cuts back on like the amount of like dishes that I have because I'm not really making any. So I think that's where the easy part is. I know that we were both talking about Melissa Alexandria's like controversial video that she came out with saying that she was doing, 4 to 5 hour eating window. And her rationale for that was that, oh, I'm creating all these dishes, that I'm having to do. And I'm like, well, the solution for that is a fruit based diet because you're not making as much. Like maybe you're making a smoothie and having to clean the blender, but there's really little prep involved. And I know you had asked earlier about how do you make like a fruit based diet work like year round. I have a few tips. One, don't get dogmatic with just eating like fresh fruit. Like be open to all the fruit, the juice, the frozen fruit, the dried fruit. I eat dates every day, all year round, and that really helps to keep the fruit up for me. Also, like I'll get into canned fruit over the winter time, and I always have like a backup too. So I'll have the canned fruit and the fresh or in the frozen fruit as backup, and the dried fruit when fresh fruit's not available. And then I eat seasonally. I eat according to what fruit is like growing right now, what's being harvested right now. So with it being fall time where we're at, apples and grapes and apple cider and actually dates just got harvested, the fresh new crop that is
I'm
coming in
getting my
from like
second box.
California and Arizona.
I'm so excited.
And then what else is in season right now? Cantaloupes are really good. So I think after done a fruit-based diet for a few years, you really kind of get in tune with what's going to be available at what time of year, and that's what you end up eating. And then I'm a really big fan of mono meals where, okay, grapes are in season. Well, one of my meals is going to be grapes. And then I also am a fan of frozen fruit smoothies so that I always have fruit available to make a smoothie with.
Mhm.
Because the smoothies are definitely a staple. Eating seasonal fresh fruit is a staple. Having dates are a staple for me. And then having the canned fruit as backup. And then always having some juice too.
Yeah. I gotta say, the one thing I do like about, or I appreciate about people like Melissa, or even, some other people that might recommend fasting throughout their day. it's because of that mindset that I don't want to do that so much. I so badly don't want to do that, that the idea of doing fruit only is so much easier. Like I can get into the mindset and eat fruit only. And that's the only reason I got to the point where I'm at now, because I'm like, eating fruit's better than not eating.
Yeah,
And then it made me feel good
absolutely.
and I kept going with it.
Right. Yeah, and I remember when you made the transition too, and you're like, I figured out that you fruit eaters have like a system here, and then you created your own fruit first protocol, which I actually been promoting a lot on my channel. I'm like, you guys
Thanks.
need to go to Amber's channel, Lean by Nature, and see what she has to say, because I think that when it comes down to being successful with eating this way in the long run, it is about developing a system.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna pause this real quick because the thing says we've got like less than 3 minutes. Do you want
Oh,
to
yeah.
stop here?
I think this is good. I can actually hear
Okay.
my son is up,
Oh,
so the
perfect.
timing has been perfect.
Yeah, that works
And
really well. Thanks so much for your time.
yeah, of course, you had some really great questions, so I
It's
appreciate
funny,
it
I'm
again.
not even close to all the questions I have.
Yeah.
It's nice that we can get into a topic and actually just keep going with it. I feel like these were all really good answers, and I once again appreciate your time.
Oh, yeah. What we should do too is maybe do this again,
Yeah,
um, and do like a part two,
yeah.
and yeah, just keep it rolling because I run out of like things that uh to talk about on my channel, and I feel like I just keep kind of repeating the
I
same
think
things over and over,
it's
but
conversation is so much easier than trying to talk to yourself, which is what I've learned since I've started doing these videos. So I completely agree with you.
absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll let you get to your son.
All right, bye, Amber.
Bye.